Welcome to this Maths Made Easy video on reciprocal trig functions. Now to start with, let's introduce our three reciprocal trig functions. And the three trig functions that we're going to be introduced to here are cosec, sec and cot. So if we start with our first function here, cosec, so this is cosecant, okay, so cosecant, which we often denote as cosec x. Cosec x, and this function here, cosec x, is defined as 1 over sine x. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll give the remaining two reciprocal trig functions, and then I'll show you the nice way to remember the functions. The next one here is sec, which we denote as secant. So we'd write this as sec x, so sec x, and here this is 1 over cos x. Okay, so 1 over cos x. And finally, we arrive at the final reciprocal trig function, which is for cot. So here, this is for cotangent. So cotangent, which we denote as cot x here. And here, this is simply 1 over tan x. Okay, so how do we remember, for example, that sec x is 1 over cos x? Well, we have a little trick here that we can use, and that's to take a look at the third letter of each of these three functions. So for example here, sec x, so the third letter here is the C, and that corresponds there to cos there. Okay, so that's how we know it's 1 over cos x. If we repeat this here with cosec x, well, the third letter is the S, and that corresponds to sine there. Okay, and finally, the third letter of cot x here is the T, and again that corresponds there to the tan x there. Okay, so that's how we remember, for example, that sec x is 1 over cos x, and that gives us everything we need there for introducing the three reciprocal trig functions. Moving on to take a look at the graphical form of our reciprocal trig functions. So let's start with our first graph here, and this is the graph of y equals cosec x. So this is y equals cosec x. Okay, and what we can notice here, using these red indicator lines, is that we have asymptotes at x equals minus 108 degrees, 0 degrees, and 180 degrees. And the reason for this is by using the reciprocal definition here. Cosec x is equal to 1 over sine x. So cosec x will be undefined when we have values where sine x is equal to 0 degrees, i.e. where x equals minus 108 degrees, 0 degrees, and 108 degrees. Let's take a look then at the second graph that we have. And this is for y equals sec x. So again, let's use an appropriate pen colour here. This is y equals sec x. Okay. And again, we can notice straight away that we have asymptotes here. And these are now at x equals minus 270 degrees, minus 90 degrees, 90 degrees, and 270 degrees. Okay, and again, we can see that using the red indicator lines here. Okay, and again, this is just simply because we'll find that cos x is equal to 0 at these points. So again, just using our reciprocal definition here, this is 1 over cos x, and again in that case, this would be where cos x is equal to 0 at these points. So x equals minus 278 degrees, x equals minus 90 degrees, x equals 90 degrees, and finally x equals 270 degrees. And finally then, to complete the set, let's take a look at cotangent x. Okay, so cot x here. And again, if we use an appropriate pen colour, this is y equals cot x. Okay. Now again, we have asymptotes at x equals minus 108 degrees, at 0 degrees, and 108 degrees. Okay. So that gives us the graphical form there of cot x. So that gives us everything we need there for taking a look at the reciprocal trig functions in graphical form. And finally, let's take a look then at the domains, ranges, and key values. So you might want to reference from this table of ranges and domains. So what we can see here is we have our three reciprocal trig functions, cosec x, sec x, and cot x. Okay, so just in case you haven't seen this, if you see CSCX like that, that just means cosec of x. And what we've got then is the domain for each reciprocal trig function and the range. So for example, for cosec x here, the domain is all x except multiples of 180 degrees, and the range is all y except -1 and 1. And just in case you're not familiar with this notation here, this -1, 1 here, with these brackets, means the value is between, but not including -1 and 1. Okay, so not including -1 and 1 there. Okay, so just be very careful with that. But that means not including -1 and 1, but the value is between. Okay. And what we've also got then is this table here for our exact values for cosec of x, sec x, and cot x. Okay, and we can see our values of x here in degrees. So you might also find that useful as well. Okay, so that gives us everything we need there for domains, ranges, and key values, and that concludes this Maths Made Easy video on reciprocal trig functions.